I wanted to wait for her to say bad bitch o'clock. I was like, I can't wait. How's everyone doing? You having a good time? Yeah. So nice to see everyone. So I'm from Canada. I live in LA now. And I am Cree, which is like Plains, and Soto, which is my mom's tribe in like Saskatchewan. And I'm also adopted. And my adoptive mom's from India, and like literal India, not like Indiana or whatever. And my adoptive dad's from Austria. But having a like Indian mom makes me the world's only Indian. So I grew up, and Soto, my mom's tribe, is spelled Saulteaux. So, and I never met anyone else from that tribe. I only knew Cree people. So I grew up calling myself Salto, and that's not what it is at all. And it's the equivalent of if a white person was adopted outside of their race and they just went their whole lives saying, oh, me, I'm Wite. Like kind of embarrassing. So, being adopted, I opened my adoption records, and I wanted to know my birth name because I thought it would be like a cool native name, like Jackie Keliiaa, or like anyone else's name on the show. I'm like, these are some sweet ass native names. And I opened my adoption records, and I found out that my birth name was Stephanie Collins. Like, Stephanie? Oh my goodness. That's someone who knows all of her signs in astrology. That's someone who goes to Starbucks and goes like, oh my God, a pumpkin spice latte? That's my spirit animal. I am so glad I'm Monique Moreau. That's like some suave French shit. I don't speak that language at all. But I'm so glad. So I am adopted, and I grew up in Cree territory, which is kind of random because my parents just chose that area after they adopted me. And I would date Native men. In college, I would date Native men who were from my tribe. But my tribe's people have a really bad habit of calling each other cousin. And I'm like, I'm adopted. You might be my cousin. Stop saying that. And that's the hardest thing about being adopted, is not fucking your cousins. Like my adopted parents have really attractive nieces and nephews that are my age. It's hard to resist. And I don't know from personal experience, but my adopted brother, who's like my biological brother, he has had sex with so many of my parents' nieces and nephews. My husband, he heard this joke once, and he was like, don't out your brother as a cousin fucker. And then my brother heard this joke, and he was like, nah, I want the world to know. So he's very proud. So I am adopted, and my parents couldn't have children, and so they adopted me and my brother. And they were the only people willing to adopt two Native children like together in a sibling group, which is very nice of them. And when I was a kid, I never told people that I was adopted, even though it's very obvious if you meet my parents. You're like, how did this, you two and then these two, how? But I didn't tell other kids, because when you're a kid and you tell another kid you're adopted, they will inevitably say, like, oh, why could your parents not have kids? It's like, no, they couldn't. And then they'll always, 100% of the time, ask, why couldn't your parents have kids? It's because your dad didn't have a dick. Like every time. They didn't know each other. I don't know how they came up with this question. And it's the hardest thing to defend. Pun kind of intended, I don't know. Ew, gross, what am I saying? So, Because it can't be like, I know my dad's dick exists, I've seen it. And I mean, who hasn't accidentally seen their dad's dick? It just happens. But also, I can't be like, I believe it exists. I have faith that it exists out there in the world. I think about it all the time. So I was just like, they're my biological parents. I'm a fluke. So before the pandemic, I'm going to change gears. I was a jazz pianist. That was my job. And pretty cool. And I got this really good gig where I was playing jazz piano when car dealerships unveiled their new models. And it was a sweet gig because I got paid really well, and they would like bring me in to unveil the Corvette or the new Leaf or the new Mustang. Like everything was really cool, like tray passed appetizers, champagne. But you know who hates jazz piano? Is anyone in the market for a Chevy Silverado. They really hated me. I rarely get heckled doing stand-up, but I've been heckled at those events. Like a man in an American flag button-up walked by, and he was like, "Shut up." And I wanted to stop and be like, "Sir, you should love this more than anything. Jazz is an American art form. Like, we invented that as a people in America." And I just like the idea of a person in a lifted pickup truck with like one of those like American like police flags. I don't even know what they're called. They're just like on the back of their truck, and they're just blasting Ella Fitzgerald. So I'm like, yeah, the election was stolen. That's a stereotype I can get behind. I also taught piano before the pandemic, and it went on Zoom, and everyone lost their minds. Every piano teacher, every student. And one of my students had always been kind of philosophical, but going on Zoom made him like ramp it up a little bit. Where he was just like, "Miss Monique, are you an app in my iPad?" And I was like, "What are you saying? You've met me. You think Steve Jobs came back from the dead and programmed me into your personal iPad? Like, I don't know what you're asking." Another thing that he said was, "Are we in the past?" It's like, "What? Are we in the past?" And he was like, "Well, okay, when my dad talks about his childhood, he talks about it like it's in the past. So are we in the past right now?" And I was like, "Are you asking me if you're an adult right now remembering your childhood piano lessons?" Like, you're blowing my mind right now. If anything, I'm on my deathbed remembering this conversation. And then he was like, one time, he was like, "Miss Monique, are you autistic?" And it's like, "Oh my God, no. Why would you think that?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just a vibe thing." Like an 8-year-old kid? It's just a vibe thing? And the truth is that, yeah, I am on the autism spectrum. This kid's gonna be like, I don't know, inventing the Matrix in the future. We're gonna be batteries in his like beautiful, weird world. So I am on the autism spectrum. Who loves autism? Yay, great. So I am autistic, and or I put on a lot of weight during the pandemic, so I'm like autistic. I don't know. I like that because like thick autistics are like, "You're not thick." But I came up with it, so it's mine. So I was actually diagnosed with Asperger's in high school, and now that's not a thing anymore because we had to rebrand. Because we found out that Hans Asperger was a Nazi. and you're like, we don't want to be a part of that anymore. And Hans Asperger had a thing that he said about when he invented autism. He had a thing that he said about autistic children that was like, they have no sense of humor. When I tell autistic children a joke, they don't laugh. And I do it constantly. And I was like, what kind of racist Nazi jokes were you telling these kids? Because every autistic person I know has a sense of humor. Lots of us are comedians. I would say like 75% of us. So there's a lot of stereotypes about autism out there. One of them is that autistic people don't like sex. This is kind of a deep cut. A lot of people haven't heard this, but as an autistic person, I hear it a lot for some reason. And I personally love sex. And yeah, hell yeah. And I think it's because I like the repetition. Another one is that autistic people don't have any empathy, or compassion. But I personally identify as an empath. Anyone else here an empath? Woo! I've lived in LA for a while, and everyone claps there. They're like, yeah, I feel everyone's emotions. I'm not sick or ill. I'm just an actress. But I'm an empath, but it's a little delayed. It's like 2 weeks later, I'll be like, that person was really mad at me. 100% accurate a while later. Another one is that autistic people have superpowers. Like, Rain Man is the perfect example of this. Like, he can recite the phone book after it was a movie. Some people are like, what? It was a movie about an autistic person who could recite, had really great math abilities and could recite the phone book, count cards. Like, if you dropped a bunch of change on the ground, he knew how much it was. I don't have a superpower, but whenever I go to In-N-Out Burger, I order no onions. But yeah, that's the default. We all know that here. But I can always taste when somebody put onions on and then took them off. That's my superpower. Also, I see sound, but that's not a, you have to Google that one. So another thing is that autistic people love trains. That's the big one. No, no. It's a thing. People always say, what, you love trains? And I'm like, hell yeah, I love trains. Are you kidding me? Choo-choo? Oh my God. That's not usually part of my set. I don't know what inspired me to say choo-choo. But I love trains. They're great. And when I was in college, I dated this train conductor. And I met him at a Halloween party, and I thought it was a costume, and it was super hot that he was wearing his train conductor outfit. And he was like, no, I'm really a train conductor. And I was like, oh my God. This is the hottest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And we didn't have anything in common really outside of a love of trains. But I kept dating him, and I kept going on dates with him because I thought that maybe we'd be making out, and he'd be like, you want to go to my train right now? And see where the night takes us? And then it never happened, because they don't own the train. I don't know what I was thinking. But it must be so hard to be a train conductor, because you never know if a woman loves you for you, or if it's just an autistic woman who loves you for your train. All right, guys, that's it for me. That's where we're going to end. Thank you so much. Give it up for Jackie. Yay!